it going through the whole process at 2 minutes 26 seconds, of which the largest parts were fingerprinting and then going through the questions. And as you will know, it's up to the member states to come up with their own questions. You've got the general Schengen principle of, have you got enough money and have you got a ticket out or the means to get one? But then on top of that, every country will put on its own requirements, of which I think France is the most stringent, requiring money, a ticket out, a booking, a confirmed accommodation booking, and also travel insurance. But actually, they were all asked at Prague Airport as well, and they even specified you've got to have €66 or £57 in cash for each day you're going to be here. But we will let you in if you've got a credit or a debit card. But I found that it was quite a slow process, and one which did lead on Sunday afternoon to some quite significant queues building up.
2 minutes 26 seconds was what?
That is from the moment you approach the kiosk, and they are dotted slightly randomly around. And my advice to anybody going through is, if you're getting off an aircraft and you're going through the entry-exit system, look for these kiosks. They're tall, they look like kind of overgrown Daleks, and they have generally green lights on, and just find one. Then it's 2 minutes 26 seconds from the moment you approach it, and it basically says, right, it knows that you're there because it's got a camera up there, and it says put your passport down. And then from there to the time it says okay, and now the fun starts, because you're going through the old analogue check as well. 2 minutes 26 seconds, because of course this is just an extra layer of bureaucracy on top of what we already have, at least for the first 6 months.
The 2 minutes 26 seconds is actually somewhat less than some people were predicting, where 4 minutes was a predicted timescale.
Very much so, and it is definitely varying according to the individuals. I spent quite a lot of time, and I'm quite surprised I wasn't actually arrested, hanging around watching what people were doing and how they were behaving. And there were a fair number of airport staff and indeed the police, Czech police, helping people, and it tended to be, as you possibly might imagine, older people who were having particular issues with this, whereas younger people were just, it's a machine, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, and going straight through. So there was a spectrum, but I think for a reasonably regular traveller who's accustomed to going through borders, 2.5 minutes is probably about right. At the checkpoint, it will be less if they want fewer fingers printed, and if they ask fewer difficult questions. It even says, are you going to a spa? I wish.
Just before we move to Mr. Lejeune.
Well, just a very quick question about Prague. I was into Prague on the 18th of September, out of Prague on the 26th, and there were lots of machines that I don't know if they were working at that stage, but certainly the group I was with, some of whom were elderly, were having great problems with them, and we all, in the end, decided it'd be far easier to just go and queue in the normal way, but as you said, we'd had to do all 5 fingers. So it wasn't presumably working on those dates, end of September. When did it come in Prague?
Well, it was due to come in, I believe, at 1 minute past midnight on Sunday, the 12th of October, Central European time.
Right. So what I was seeing was an old system, but with lots of machines that weren't working properly,
yes,
and causing a lot of confusion.
Well, of course, every EU country is sovereign, and they have their own processes, and certainly in Prague, they've been doing photographs and fingerprinting for their own security purposes. And, for example, in Poland, they will very often, if you're a third country national, take your photograph, which they will store on their computer, but it's the entry-exit system kiosks which are feeding the information to a database which I think is in suburb of Strasbourg, but there's other rumours that it's in a nuclear bunker in Austria. I have not been to check.
Just one final thing, if I can. Just in terms of the fact that you did not go through the system on the way in, why was that?
Well, naturally, I engaged the excellent officer in conversation about that, and he said, "Yeah, we're not starting it yet. Probably sometime in the morning, later on today."
So this was everybody didn't have to do it. So this was not an example of them using flexibility that they have for the first 6 months if a queue was building up. And from what you were saying, coming the other way, where queues were building up, they were still requiring everybody to do it? Or did they let some people go through without?
They were very much waving people through. I got I got a comment from somebody who was there slightly before I got there, who said, they're picking on the British and Australians and saying, just go through. I have no idea why you would pick those particular nationalities, but there is flexibility. But when it was a very odd process when I went through, because the plane had got there early, so it wasn't quite Sunday yet. So I went and loitered in duty free, and then when I came out, I was the only person there. So anyway, they hadn't decided to switch on the system at that point.
Okay, let's turn to Eurostar. So, how did it go?
Thank you, Lord Chairman. So Eurostar, we've been working for several years preparing for EES. We've invested massively and on several fronts. Firstly is around having the right kit, the right infrastructure in our terminals. For that's over £10 million, 11 million euros plus that we invested in. If you look at St Pancras, that was through several means. One is making sure that we had firepower at the border, and by that I mean we've doubled the border for the French border in St Pancras in comparison to just a couple of years ago. And furthermore, we've equipped St Pancras with 49 kiosks in order to do the pre-registration for EES. Initially, it's only 24 kiosks that were provided by the French Interior Ministry. Our modelling actually clearly showed that we needed more, particularly to be able to adapt to the peaks that we have, and particularly, those morning peaks we're going to have a majority of non-EU and therefore EES eligible passengers. So 49 for us was the right number, and also having them in key locations in St Pancras that really sort of fed into the natural passenger journeys as they arrived in the station, and then naturally fed in to the check-in at Eurostar.
Let me just interrupt you, just so I'm clear about this. You made the assessment that 49 were needed. The French made an assessment that 26 were needed. The French provided 26. Who paid for the remaining, whatever that is, 23?
Yeah, so 24, forgive me, were provided by the French Interior Ministry. We Eurostar purchased an additional 25.
Right.
To bring the number to 49. So our preparation in terms of that physical infrastructure was quite significant. And as I say, beyond the kiosks is also having that borders. We have new gens or e-gates also that ES compatible, and also doubling the manual positions for French border officers within the station. Beyond that, we've also done a lot to help our customers every step of the way, and that's by developing digital tools. So we have a travel checklist that's going to be available to passengers and help them, guide them. Do I need EES? Do I need ETA? There's a lot of change, and not just from an EES point of view, and therefore helping our passengers what they need and also what they need to do as soon as they arrive in the station was a key objective for us. And beyond that is, working incredibly closely with the border authorities, the French Interior Ministry, the PAF, the French Border Authority, and other member states such as Belgium and Holland, where we, of course, will be integrating EES in that passenger journey there. And making sure that we make full use of the new EU regulation that enables a very progressive launch of EES. Eurostar fought hard for this. We were regularly at the European Commission making our position clear that a big bang approach, although we were ready for it, presented a number of risks, and to have that EU regulation for us was a key to a successful rollout of EES. And therefore making full use of it when we launched EES on the 12th last Sunday for us was logical. So we started processing some of our passengers out of St Pancras and also in Paris. We have a dedicated border position, so 2 PAF officers in St Pancras, 1 PAF officer in Paris that are doing EES files. So we started 1 o'clock UK time on Sunday. And yeah, the learning's actually quite positive. So over 200 passengers were processed out of St Pancras, over 150 in Paris on Sunday, and actually yesterday we did 550, maybe slightly more than that, full EES files, so with the full biometrics, so with the fingerprints as well as the facial biometrics out of St Pancras. And I observed personally actually some really good transaction times. So this process, this stage is without the kiosks, so the full processing at the manual booth, and I was observing transaction times of 50 seconds. So 50 seconds, 50, and that's for the full biometrics as well as the passport check and the stamping for EES eligible passengers. So quite encouraging, and that's without the kiosks that does that pre-registration, which we'll be introducing over the next few weeks.
Can I just check 2 or 3 things? How many fingers do you require fingerprints from?
4 fingers of the right hand.
Professor Vavoula, we're going to ask you in a minute very specifically about some of the legislative requirements. So who made the decision that it was 4? Were you told by the UK government to only go for 4 rather than, as the Czechs have done, to require both hands?
This is a border authority prerogative, Lord Chairman. They've decided.
But you were told what you had to do.
Yeah, so the French border authority, implement it. Eurostar doesn't, specify. We've invested in the kit and
just wanted it on the record who made the decision, so we're clear about it. And your 50 seconds compares very favourably with 2 minutes 26 seconds. So what do you put down the huge difference between 50 seconds and 2 minutes 26 seconds to?
50 seconds, to be completely transparent, is very much in an optimal process where your biometrics are taken and are successful first time round. Fingerprints can be challenging sometimes, but and I repeatedly saw it yesterday, where that actually process wasn't too problematic. But if you have biometric capture that's efficient and optimal first time round, then you have a process that is around 50 seconds. Furthermore, in terms of the Schengen questions, we saw the French border authorities were applying a degree of pragmatism around that requirement for the Schengen questions. Now we know that those Schengen questions, cause some confusion when it comes to our passengers having to answer these, particularly in the kiosk process. And we're really happy that actually we've through discussions with the French Interior Ministry and colleagues, that those questions can be technically removed from the kiosks during the 6-month introductory period, so thus helping that introduction of EES over the next 6 months.
But the actual questions you're going to ask, as we heard from Mr. Calder, the French in particular require quite a lot. Again, you had no choice in which questions are going to be asked as and when that is fully introduced.
No, so I guess that's their interpretation of the Schengen requirements and how they apply them. We're glad that actually during this 6 months, and we hope beyond, that pragmatism is returning and that this questioning is not systematic but more targeted. Which is
and one final, because you're the only operator that we have here, just so I'm clear. how confident are you that as we roll forward and more people are required to go through it over the 6-month introductory phase, that in the event, in that period, in the event that there are queues building up at St Pancras, how confident are you that you will get authority from the French authorities to enable you to not require everybody to do it, to be able to just bypass the system? What's the sort of negotiating mechanism?
Thank you, Lord Chairman, and that's obviously a key question, and I'm confident on several levels. Firstly, when you look at that initial introduction and you look at the infrastructure that we've invested in and seen those initial transaction times, I think it's very comforting to see that, yeah, we've got something that is going to respond to the EES challenge. Secondly, when we have, and actually our CEO and I, we were at the French Interior Ministry just a couple of weeks ago, and the position was quite clear there, is that they are not going to compromise on border fluidity, neither will they compromise on border security either. And, you know, using the levers around, you know, the EU regulation, you know, is going to be critical in how we maintain that fluidity at the border, with ability to remove biometrics at certain points when we are faced with congestion, or going beyond that. We have a very good collaboration with the border authority, and I think that is beyond this principal approach that is clearly stated. You know, we also have that excellent collaboration that, for me, gives me no doubt that when we do have challenges, that we will make the right calls and mitigate any congestion, Lord Chairman.
I know Baroness Burton will want to go into a bit more detail on some of that, and particularly, of course, we are concerned about all the stories that there are going to be huge queues on motorways and goodness knows what else. But Baroness Burton will pick that up. Professor, thank you for that. Professor Vavoula, you've listened to two people who've actually been involved directly in doing it. What's your reflections on what they've said and some of the variations in the way the system seems to be operating, with number of fingers and different number of questions and so on?
Thank you very much for the question. First of all, thank you very much for the reporting on the initial days of the EES operationalization. Actually, there has not been so much reporting, and I've seen quite a few videos of travelers and passengers themselves reporting their experience with the entry-exit system, and actually reporting that even in countries like Estonia, which suppose, as mentioned earlier, to be fully operational, actually the kiosks are not operating at all. And any registration of fingerprints and facial images is taking place manually, which has significantly increased the timing. In Estonia, I've seen the timing for capturing even the facial image up to 4 minutes. This has resulted in a series of longer queues compared to other border crossing points. And of course, the variation that was mentioned is very much alarming, because the founding regulation on the functioning of the entry-exit system is very clear that the biometric data that must be collected by passengers are only 4 fingerprints from the right hand and a facial image. Actually, the 10 fingerprint registration was discarded during the legislative process precisely in order to reduce the queuing times. Therefore, already on the first days of the operation of the EES, we see a violation of the entry-exit system rules in practice, which is very surprising considering that the regulation is from 2017. Member states have had 8 years to prepare for the operation of the entry-exit system, and therefore I'm a bit worried to see already that much divergence in the application of the rules.
Why? Have you got any understanding of how that can possibly have happened?
No, I do not. I will have to review whether there is any information on how the Czech Republic operated its own entry-exit system before the actual EU entry-exit system, and actually see whether this was a requirement prior to the entry-exit system and wanted to maintain their own standards. But to me, this is a clear violation of the rules.
But, sorry, there's a difference between it being a violation of the rules or a situation where there is a minimum requirement by the rules and the Czech Republic have decided they want to do more. So we know that some states can ask different questions and more questions than others, so presumably there's the same flexibility to have more fingers fingerprinted than the minimum requirement of 4, or does it specifically say it must be 4?
Exactly. It is the latter option. The EES regulation is adamant and very explicitly states that the facial image and 4 fingertips must be recorded in the entry-exit system. This creates legal certainty. It creates also a level playing field across the participating countries, and it cannot be that member states can have a variation. On the contrary, the Schengen Borders Code on the performance of border control with the questions provides a little bit more flexibility. It's border control authorities are a little bit are more flexible in how what questions they are asking the travelers, and actually those questions are not laid down in the EES regulation.
Okay, thank you. Baroness Burton.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if we could just go back to sort of how prepared you are, and whether or not particularly to Simon Lejeune, and whether or not the postponement has actually helped. I was picking up from your previous answers that perhaps it has, but to the Chair's point, I mean, how confident are you really that we're not going to have miles and miles of queues, particularly sort of down the motorway, which tends to happen as sort of summer from hell for British holiday makers?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And we were ready 12 months ago. We'd already invested, and did that transformation of the border, and so we were absolutely ready when it was initially imagined for October 2024. Nonetheless, there were some risks associated, particularly with a Big Bang approach, and therefore that postponement and particularly enabling a progressive rollout is, I think, a huge success for the travel industry, and particularly with a pragmatic rollout that also enables levers when we are faced with congestion. I think really puts certainly Eurostar in a much sort of secure footing when it comes to introducing EES. We saw, as I mentioned, some really good signs around how the tech is performing.
In fact, could I just come in on that?
Yes, please.
The tech, a couple of follow-ups on that. I mean, how are we doing on the sort of smartphone application?
Yes, and I think that's I was going to actually come on to that, because I think it's a very, very good question. And certainly, as much as Eurostar fought for a progressive rollout, we also continue to fight for digitalization of the process, and particularly the Frontex app. We believe in its potential, and we see its potential around preparing passengers for the kiosk process, and particularly capturing the facial biometrics you could do, from the comfort of your own home before you arrive at the kiosk, and answering any questions and scanning your passports ahead of that as a real sort of logical next step. Furthermore, you can use the app potentially when it comes to subsequent voyages through the system, and that again can really help speed up that process. The good news...
Just Mr. Calder, you wanted to intervene at that point.
Forgive me, Lord Chairman. If I may, I've looked into this really very closely, as I'm sure Mr. Lejeune has, and Frontex basically came out a year ago and said, we've got this fantastic Travel to Europe app. Please, member states, will you take it on and do your own versions and so on. So far, Only the Swedes have, and I have not yet been able actually to find and download the app. So basically the take-up has been negligible. It is gradually probably going to increase, but at the moment it's, and I'm being asked by quite a lot of prospective travellers, surely I can register something in advance, but you can't at the moment.
Simon, would you like to come in on that? Why do you think that is?
Yes, I think, I mean, the good news is in our discussions now, particularly with France, there is real ambition around integrating digital tools such as the Frontex app, in the process going forward. Clearly, the priority has been around making sure that the current tech in terms of kiosks and border technology was up and running. I think, it took a bit of time to maybe, I guess, for countries to fully realise the potential of such tools in the process. But I think the good news is that, that vision is becoming clearer, that appetite and that ambition also seems to be sort of on the horizon, and will continue to push. And I think having a border app at some point in the future is becoming more a sort of real prospect.
Right, okay. I mean, it seems surprising that you've had a long time to sort of think about this, that is hasn't been a more it's in such a nascent place. Perhaps it's to do with security of the tech. I mean, is that sort of something that's a concern, do you think?
I can't sort of respond on behalf of the border agencies. I know that this Frontex app obviously has to be integrated into each national system, so it's not just a sort of off-the-shelf solution. There's I think a lot of sort of integration work that is part of the solution, and I suspect.
Sorry to intervene. Just to be absolutely clear, the technology, as we understand, exists. The decision not to use it lies with the member states within the Schengen area. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they have known this app has been available. I mean, it was in its nascent thing 3-4 years ago when we were first looking at this. Has anybody explained to you why we have had to wait so long for something that is so obviously desperately needed?
So, I think, as Simon was reporting, I think this Frontex app only really came out last year, Lord Chairman, and I guess it's how you imagine the potential of that app and how you integrate it into the various national solutions for EES. I think is what's caused that time.
We last investigated this over a year ago. We were told that the iPad system was almost ready. We were told then categorically it was almost ready. A year later, you're telling us that nobody's using it because it's not been taken on board and integrated. It's deeply frustrating. Sorry, but I know you want to come in, but Baroness Merton.
Just a final question, moving on to a slightly different thing, but consumer-based, is the costs, obviously, of the delay, but also the cost of the whole infrastructure. Has that been passed on to the consumer? And perhaps, I think Simon perhaps wants to come in as well as, both Simons, sorry, Simon Calder and Simon Lejeune.
In terms of the delay to the introduction of EES?
The whole thing, I mean, the whole cost of it, just the honest answer, has it been passed on to the consumer?
Yes, so from our perspective, we have invested quite significantly, as I've mentioned, but our investment was also within the context of the growth that we're facing. Eurostar keeps on breaking records. We're seeing sort of year-on-year growth, and having a border capability that can support that growth, particularly at St Pancras, was completely very much paramount. So investing in that integration with EES and also within the context of future growth was paramount. Now we did also have some financial support, from the UK government that was provided to the juxtaposed ports, Eurostar, Eurotunnel, and indeed the ferries.
But is that, to take that it's a yes, that the tickets did go up as a consequence?
No, I can't. You know, we haven't increased our ticket prices as a result of EES. You know, we've invested. We've had contributions, say from UKG. We've also had investment from the French government around the 24 kiosks that were initially provided. But I don't think we could say that we've passed on that additional cost to the passenger.
I mean, if you want to come.
Well, just looking at from a basic business point of view, Eurostar has had a cost, I'm estimating, of £6.5 million for the installation, which is a cost to the business. Eurotunnel, Getlink, have invested almost £100 million in the system, and that being a cost will be ultimately met either by their shareholders or by their customers, whereas the overall scheme, the costs of that in general are being met either from EU funds for the overall framework, but then from member states. But they will down the road be hoping to make some savings when the whole system is up and running, because it may be more efficient than the present arrangements. But of course, a lot of that depends on e-gates, which is an entire different story.
Yeah. I mean, the one piece of really good news is I've just been informed that in fact the iPad, which is going to be used obviously at Dover system, is apparently now available, which is good news. Baroness Buscombe.
Thank you. I have to say, I went through Eurostar and the process from St Pancras last month. Okay, it was last month, but I think I was really impressed at the number of people that were working there, the relationship clearly between both sides, France and England, felt incredibly positive. So I think there is quite a good story to tell, and it felt that the preparation was very good. But I think the obvious question, and I know, Simon, you were asked this on GB Radio yesterday, or was it Talk Radio, one of those, what's going to happen once we've all been through the system once, we've had our biometrics taken, everything else has been done, am I then being able to go through a different queue of those who've already signed up to the system?
My understanding is that you definitely will not. The only people who get a separate queue are, of course, EU and Schengen nationals, and they will at all times be given priority. But no, the only difference is that you will not need to give your fingerprints again. Once you've registered those, that should be it. And I'm just having discussions with the Home Office at the moment about whether, because they maintain those fingerprints are valid for 3 years, a rolling 3 years, so that if you go through again within 3 years, it gets another 3 years. But crucially, when your passport expires, whereas my contention from having read the directives is that actually it will know that Lord Chairman has registered, it will know his face, his fingerprints, and therefore, were he to get a different passport, it would not matter because he would be the same traveller.
We'll ask.
I have to wait behind then everybody doing it for the first time.
Oh yes.
And I didn't realise that one's fingerprints actually change after 3 years.
But in terms of the rolling 3 years or 3 years, or when you review, we'll get Professor Vavoula to pick that up when we come to the next question, which we're now going to move on. We've got a series of specific issues, so we'll do them relatively quickly, and we're going to turn to Baroness Hughes.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. This is primarily for Professor Vavoula and also Simon Calder, I think. And you've touched on some of the information relevant to this question already, so perhaps it can be brief. How was the variation of the introduction? How is that varied by country, the introduction of the EES? And do you have any other intelligence about which countries are the most advanced and what the timetables are for other countries? You've mentioned 3 that have went live on day 1 to various extents, not perfectly. But what does the whole picture look like as far as you know?
Well, if I may pick up just ahead of the professor, it's a really interesting variation. I haven't got full responses from everybody, but for example, a typical case would be Romania, where they have said, we are going to implement this at a really quite small Transylvanian airport, Sibiu, from the first day. Then we will be extending it to other airports gradually. And of course they have road crossings and indeed rail crossings from Moldova. So they will be, and in time Ukraine, so they will be rolling it out slowly across those. But it's generally, Baron, it's a kind of matter of wait and see, because once we get some learnings, and Mr. Lejeune has been describing those very well, then countries will be more confident. And Germany, for instance, they just said, yep, day one, Düsseldorf airport, that's all we're going to be doing, because clearly they don't want possibly to, I guess, contaminate Frankfurt and Munich, their main hubs, by having problems there. And elsewhere, well, Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris is a place I've got my eye on, because between 5:45 and 6 o'clock in the morning, there are 9 wide-bodied arrivals from all parts of the world outside the Schengen area, and so you are looking at maybe 2,500, 3,000 people all converging on those kiosks. That's going to be quite lively.
Okay, thank you. So just before I invite Professor Vavoula to come in, is there an ambition of a time when this will be a universal system?
Oh, sure, 170 days is when everybody is supposed to have completed everything. Then you have 10 days, I guess, for people who are going to be a little slower to catch up. From the 10th of April next year, that's when they switch off analog processing, although there is then, my understanding, the opportunity to, within the next 60 days to actually swerve the EES if queues are building up. So there's a lot of flexibility if you're a member state, and my understanding is that they're all, many of them are taking advantage of it. It's only places like Estonia and Luxembourg, which only has one EES, one international Schengen frontier, the airport, who are moving ahead immediately.
Thank you very much. Professor Vavoula?
First of all, I would like to make one comment as regards the Frontex app that was mentioned earlier, if I may. Yes, Sweden has already indicated its interest in use of the app in selected border points, including the Arlanda airport, but there is a series of other member states, particularly Portugal, Italy, Hungary, and Greece, that are also have indicated their wish to use the app. France, Germany, and the Netherlands will do pilot testing in the next year. My understanding of why this is slowed down is perhaps because, first of all, they want to make use of the kiosks and see how the phased approach of the EES will take place at the actual border crossing points before going into working on the app. However, there is further information in non-public EU documents, and that's a problem with transparency because we cannot find much information. That brings me to the second point that has to do with the readiness and preparedness of member states. I have talked with various representations within the Council of the EU, and in specific documents, all participating countries have in principle declared their preparedness in operationalizing the EES. However, to back up with additional information, we know that the 3 most prepared countries were supposedly the Czech Republic, Estonia, and Luxembourg. As mentioned by Mr. Calder, Luxembourg has only 1 border crossing point, so that was easier on their part. There's no land border or sea border, which are far more complicated, and that explains also the phased approach. In other countries, the operation of the EES has started in single airports. So for Germany, this is Düsseldorf. For Norway, this has been Oslo. In Spain, the EES has been first operational in Madrid airport. Other airports will flow, and then the Spain's few land borders will flow, and at the end, the sea borders. However, it is not clear if the crossing from Gibraltar will be included, because under a new treaty, the British overseas territory will soon be subsumed into the Schengen era in all but name. So from that perspective, they may not be a border crossing point anymore there. So Spain has been a country which is very much of interest to the United Kingdom, but it has a very, very phased approach of the EES with a lot of flexibility. and it's very unclear in terms of timeline when the other major airports are going to operationalize the ES. As you know, the regulation on the phased approach on the ES provides a lot of flexibility. It gives some goals in terms of days and what member states, participating states, need to do within specific timeframes. But at the end of the day, it's a matter of member states to have a national rollout plan as to when and where exactly and how the EES is going to be operational.
Just before we move on the issue of the 3 years, can you just tell us your understanding of what the requirement is? Is it going to be that after 3 years you will have to do it all again, or is it a rolling 3 years if you haven't been through into the Schengen area for 3 years, that's when you have to do it again?
Exactly, it's the latter option. Basically, Article 34 of the EES regulation says that the data will be kept for 3 years following the last exit record and will be deleted after that if there is no further entry. So for regular travelers, the data will be continuously kept and the renewal period of the 3 years will be renewed every time a person exits and has an exit record on the entry-exit system. There is possibility to also, on the basis of consent, individuals say that they want their data to be kept for 5 years, for longer. And similarly, for 5 years if there's no exit record, but that's a whole other question. But in principle, the data are being kept for 3 years following the last exit record. People who
it's a rolling 3 year. Thank you. That's very helpful and helpful to people travelling to know that, which is the next issue.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman.
Baroness Brachel.
Thank you. Has the UK government done enough to communicate the changes to British travellers?
Thank you. A good question. It's a very difficult one for the UK government because its hands are completely tied. If I may go back, and I hate to mention the EU referendum, but obviously the UK was fully engaged with the initial stages of the entry-exit system. I am not sure that during the exit negotiations, the fact of the entry-exit system was really considered, but the UK government is in the difficult position of this is being done to us. There's nothing that we can do. You can turn up at London St Pancras. You may or may not find that you go through the EES process during the first 6 months. After that, you will be. Crucially, you don't need to prepare anything in advance. And I think there's been a lot of confusion between the entry-exit system, which is a necessary condition for the ETIAS scheme. A lot of people are thinking, from 12th of October, I need to do something. You don't need to do anything.
And we leave that because we're going to come on to that in a second. But yeah.
Anything you wish to add?
We've been working very, very closely with the Department for Transport, indeed the Home Office, around how, particularly in the context of juxtaposed controls and the potential impact on UK soil, the EES will have. Communicating with the passengers has been a feature of that preparation. We've seen that awareness has increased, and actually we did our own polling just last week to sort of gauge what the awareness was out there for London and the South East, and you're seeing a pretty good awareness around the EES, and more specifically prospective passengers understanding more what it means for them in terms of the process that they have to conform to when travelling to Europe.
Could the government have done something better? I mean, you say it's been done on to us, but on the other hand, nevertheless, the passengers are affected, and the government has published, some information.
It's really difficult because first of all, the government's obviously got lots and lots to do. Secondly, travellers, in my experience, and I include myself in this, are all a bit kind of muddled about EES, ETIAS, ESTA, ETA, nobody quite knows what's happening. A lot of people think that they're going to have to be fingerprinted coming into the UK, which is clearly not going to happen. And so I would probably say that the Home Office comms have been pretty reasonable, well-timed, a few days ahead, saying to people, this is coming, you don't need to worry about it, but there will be changes. And the overall message, which includes the travel industry, was just allow a bit of extra time. And we actually had a senior figure from the travel industry, Julia Loboué Said, the chief executive of the Advantage Travel Partnership, warning on Radio 4 that you could have to wait up to 4 hours. I think we're a long way short of that, but it just emphasises that all you can do is really just be patient.
Lord Tope.
And are there any misconceptions about EES and e-gates?
Yes. So I'm not sure that the government particularly helped when coming back from a meeting in Brussels. I think, forgive me, the Prime Minister said something to the effect of, I've got great news, you will be able to get on your holidays faster because the EU has agreed to improve the access to e-gates. That was an unusual thing, I felt, for the Prime Minister to say, because it's down to the member states. And one of the many questions, and I'm sure Professor Vavoula has done this as well, one of the many questions I've made to the member states is, when this starts, is there going to be any change to your e-gates? And they're saying no. And for instance, Estonia, way ahead in terms of IT, they say, we're hoping that Brits may be able to use them by 2027. And so a lot of people will see these kiosks, cameras, and so on, and think, oh, this is an e-gate. It isn't, it's a kiosk. The e-gates are over there. If you're lucky, you may be able to go through them. And all those people who are smiling and rushing to the beer or the bar or the beach are the lucky people who've got Irish ancestry and therefore an Irish passport.
Lord Tope.
I mean, on the topic of e-gates, we're very lucky insofar as non-EU passengers, UK nationals, can use e-gates in St Pancras and indeed in Paris. And with the EES, that will not stop. So there will be an additional step in terms of doing the kiosk process, but UK nationals will still be able to enjoy the use of those e-gates that we've invested in that are fully EES compatible.
Thank you.
Which sequence? Lord Tope.
Sure.
Yes,
yes. Do you expect that ETS, the introduction of ETS, will follow EES smoothly and on time? Or do you have concerns? Yes, I can see you do have concerns about this, and if so, what are they?
Oh, no, I don't really have concerns, except in making sure that people understand what they have to do. If the EES is running on time and it's been successfully launched, then there is a very clear pathway for ETIAS, which is it will come in 6 months after the EES is fully operational. It will be optional for the first 6 months, which is very nice of them. And then even when it's not optional, it will still be, you'll still get a free pass if you turn up at London St Pancras and you've not got your ETIAS. There is still scope for you to be allowed one strike before you are out and to get in. So I think ETIAS, if EES works, should be just an extra layer of red tape on top, but something which I cannot see necessarily any problems with. So it's more communicating to people, right, EES is up and running, this is the next thing where you are going to have to prepare something in advance and pay €20.
Professor Vavoula, any comment on that?
I agree. There are some concerns. I'm a little bit more pessimistic about how smooth traveling will be following the subsequent and concurrent operation of both the EES, the ETIAS, and at the same time the Vs for visa requiring travelers. So there are going to be too many databases being operational at the same time or border crossing points. So you have to understand that the operationalization of ETIAS presents additional technical challenges because it relies quite a lot also on the work of ETIAS Central Unit within Frontex. It requires the division of algorithms. It relies on the operation of all the other large-scale IT systems to do the cross-checks of passengers. So not only the entry-exit system, but also the other databases that are operational, which means that there is a whole network of systems that need to work smoothly at the same time. So on the one hand, we have 3 databases which are very much operational for quite a number of years, but putting additional layers one after the other may create a lot of glitches, a lot more glitches than one might think. And in particular, the concurrent operation of the EES and ETIAS may confuse travelers even more because, as was mentioned, for ETIAS, there is a requirement to prepare something in advance. So for all the 2 systems to work out well, first of all, from a technical perspective, the EES must function well so that it feeds data to ETIAS, so that ETIAS can also do its checks on pre-screening the travelers. And on top of that, the 2 systems need to work well together at the same time at the border crossing points in order to allow for the registration and for the checking of the ETIAS authorization by border guards or the visa authorization for the visa requiring. So we see additional layers of border security, which I believe that for some months at least, they will require quite a lot of navigation and guidance and a lot of help by the EU agency, which is responsible for the operational management of the systems, and may lead also to a lot of variation of practices at the national level.
You've taken us into fascinating areas I know Baroness Cash was actually going to raise. So is there anything further on that particular issue while we're on it that you want to raise, Baroness Cash?
Yes, I mean, I think the data sharing aspect of this is really important. And Professor Vavoula, I think we'd love to know a bit more about what the plans are for data sharing, what's going to happen now as the system rolls out, and what is envisaged to happen later, and what's your view on the reliability of that data and the likelihood of it being successfully shared?
Thank you very much for the question. So basically, ETIAS does pre-screening of travelers. One of the requirements and one of the criteria for that pre-screening has to do with the entry-exit record of travelers in the past. So the entry-exit record, which determines whether someone is a bona fide or a mala fide traveler, is create statistical data that are then fed into the algorithms. And it's one of the criteria for determining whether a traveler should get an ETIAS authorization. A similar is whether someone has an alert in the Schengen information system, for example. So the reliability of the entry system data is crucial because if the statistical data that are produced are not reliable enough, they are not going to be able to be fed into the algorithms of ETIAS. So I believe that for some months, and considering the degree of flexibility that member states have in operationalizing the entry-exit system, will create inadequate and inaccurate statistical data in the entry-exit system, at least for some months. We've heard earlier that in the testimony by Mr. Calder that he went through the system 3 times. So already that we show you an example of inadequate data without an entry record at the same time. So 3 exit records, no entry record. So already that demonstrates that the statistical data are not going to be of good quality, and any feeding of them into ETIAS will also produce inaccurate results.
Crikey. Gosh. We have the benefit of your expertise in this. How serious an issue is this, and what do you hope to see happen with this level of the scale of the problem?
I believe that for some months the data should not be used, and already the regulation from 2025 on the phased-out approach demonstrates that the data, for instance, should not be used in order to determine the maximum duration of a person's stay within the Schengen area. So there is already consideration that the data in the EES will be incomplete and thus inaccurate. The degree of the problem depends on the implementation. If the implementation is with inaccuracies, with incomplete, or this pick and choose approach of travelers will create more and more problems in the data that the entry-exit system produce. I believe we need a period of time for the system to fully roll out, for glitches and problems to be resolved before, and making sure with an evaluation that the data are of good quality in order to be able to use for further users, any other further users, in ETIAS or elsewhere.
Professor Vavoula, this is a really important issue you've raised, and I think members of the committee, just looking at them, clearly somewhat shocked by what you've just told us about the potential problems in the way you've described it. And I wonder, rather than us asking you further details, you would be kind enough to quite urgently give us a note on these issues, and in particular, could you add into that the issue of the sharing of data that's gathered with the UK? Because, of course, following Brexit, we've lost out on a number of database access, and clearly this database about people moving around would be very helpful to us. Given we've a number of other quite important questions, I hope both of our witnesses will be happy to stay for another sort of quarter of an hour or so, if colleagues can be fairly quick on what it, but I am very anxious that we pick up the various other points. So if you're happy to do that, Professor Vavoula, we'll move on to Baroness Hughes.
Thank you, yes. We'd just like to raise with you the question of the impact of the ETA, actually, that the UK has introduced. Whether you have got an impression of the impact that's had on tourism and businesses in particular. Do you sense that visitors from non-visa countries are sufficiently aware of the need to have an ETA? And do you know of any, great problems with its administration at all?
Mr. Lejeune, do you want to kick off?
Thank you, Baroness Hughes. Again, just as we worked incredibly closely with the Continental Border Authorities, we've worked very closely with UK Border Force around the ETA rollout, and particularly how we engage with our customers and ensure, they know that they have to prepare for ETA. The good news, actually, our compliance levels is incredibly high, and we're seeing that people are overwhelmingly arriving with the ETA before they arrive at the UK border. For us it's a very good result at this stage. I think we want to continue to find ways that we engage with our customers to make sure they have ETA, but also we want to explore technological avenues. We ask our customers to give advanced passenger information. Is there means that through that process one can check whether they've got an ETA, and again with that opportunity of removing any sort of transaction or discussion, from the station or port or whatever. So, we think that A, at the moment, this is going really well, but B, let's see what technology can bring to make sure, that we remove any sort of discussions or transactions, from the station going forward.
Okay, so from your perspective, you think that your customers are aware of it and they're generally complying, as you say. So would you say you haven't really seen a diminution of flow of tourists particularly, and perhaps an impact on business?
Indeed, Baroness Hughes, 2025, just like 2024, is seen, record-breaking volumes at Eurostar. In our stations, we beat daily, weekly volumes over the summer period, and it's shown that there's a big appetite.
Baroness Hughes, just to interrupt. Am I not correct, however, that when the ETA was first introduced in the Gulf countries, there was a very significant drop in the number of people travelling from Gulf countries to the UK?
Give me, Lord Chairman, I can't comment on that.
All right.
Lord Chairman, excuse me if I may. Yes, this was largely because of the, how can I put it, bold decision by the UK to say you are going to have an ETA, even if you're only arriving at Heathrow, having an overpriced cup of coffee and then getting on another flight. That was dropped very early on before it was rolled out to everybody else.
Following a recommendation of this committee.
Exactly. And just on tourism, it's very, very difficult to detect what impact ETA is having because we are in the middle of a kind of very difficult time for inbound tourism because of the decision, 4 years ago now, to drop, to ban anybody who doesn't have a full passport, so that disenfranchised 300 million EU and Schengen citizens, which clearly had an impact because they can go to 30 countries without any extra bureaucracy to come here. They have to get a full passport and then they have to pay £16 to get in. So I always watch the DCMS figures on tourism with interest.
Lord Henley.
Could I move on to dual nationals and the concerns about UK-EU dual nationals travelling between UK and Schengen? Is the official guidance clear enough? And how are UK nationals resident overseas, UK dual nationals resident overseas, affected by ETA?
Yes, so we're very fortunate and lucky to have many dual nationals travelling with us, Lord. Our communication has been also encompassing, that particular segment of passengers, making sure that they know, what is expected at the border. We engage, quite significantly, and particularly with the development of these travel checklist tools that we have, and how we also guide them in each of our station. For us has been sort of a key objective, so we are content that we do sort of design specific communications for them and help them through that process, and I guess they have a bit of a sort of best of both worlds, frankly, when they go through the process.
Your own guidance you're talking about, and I was thinking particularly about the government's guidance. Do you have any concerns about that?
No concerns to report, Lord. Right.
I think that an awful lot of people with dual nationality are simply doing the fairly obvious things which may not be entirely in line with government advice, which is that, of course, if you, let's say Italian, if you have an Italian passport, you will always use that going out in order to jump all the queues and get into the Schengen area quickly, and then coming back you will use your British passport because you don't want an ETA. And of course anybody who has got an Irish passport, that is the most valuable document in the world, because no ETA and it gets you through Schengen as well.
But if you have a dual French British passport, once ETIAS is in place, ETA is already in place, will you then be able to go in with one passport and out with the other?
Yes, I mean I can't see anything that is going to affect this, because crucially, if you're going in with a French passport into France, then all that is happening at the frontier is that they are checking that it's a valid document and it belongs to you. They are not recording your movements in and out. I believe that's correct. Professor Vavoula is nodding, which is encouraging to me. And so, therefore, the fact that you've effectively entered but then not left is not really relevant. You would actually need to use your same passport going out, otherwise they'd say, where's your stamp to come in, and then you just stick to the UK one when you're coming back. But you always have to have both passports with you, and you also have to remember which passport you have given to the airline.
So why is it then that the carriers have actually been told that they're to check and ensure that that doesn't happen?
I cannot comment on that, but the fact is that
Mr. Lejeune, you can probably help us then. Is it the case? Is it the case, as we understood from earlier evidence, that carriers would be basically told that they had to check that somebody who travels one way on one passport has to travel the other way on the same passport? Is that? I mean, well, perhaps Professor Vavoula, you know the legislation. Tell us.
As far as I understand, this should not be a correct guidance given on the carriers because, as mentioned earlier, whoever goes into the EU, they are traveling as EU travelers, are EU citizens. They demonstrate their EU passport, which shows that they have the right to enter the EU, and they go back to the UK on their UK passport, and therefore they also are not registered on the ETA. And therefore, any other thing, obviously they need to carry both, but any other advice is contrary to EU free movement law.
Sorry, I think this is really important, that the advice. If I fly, once we have all the systems in place, is it not the case that when you book a return flight, for example, you can only use one passport?
Operationally, Lord Chairman, there is absolutely no problem because I fly, for example, on Ryanair a lot, and if I were lucky enough to have two passports, I would give them my British passport for the first journey. I'd give them my European passport for the journey out and the British one for the one coming back. And because I have the opportunity when checking in online to declare which document I want to use, they're perfectly happy. They're just running an airline. They just want to know that it's me. They're agnostic about which passport I'm using.
Okay.
The only thing, if I could add one last point before moving on, if a UK national is residing in the EU, they will have to use their British passport from the UK to enter the EU. But if they live in the EU, they may also have to show the EU passport to the carrier to show that they have a right to live also in the EU. So for UK nationals living in the EU, and they are dual nationals, so dual nationals living in the EU, they may have to show to the carrier both passports at the same time.
Right, thank you. I think we'll put a towel over our head and go in a dark room and think that through. But it's even more complicated, of course, in the common travel area. So let's move on to that, Baroness Cash.
So, Professor Vavoula, I'd like to go back to something about data sharing again, and this time specifically in relation to the United Kingdom and Ireland and the border there. So this has been troubling the Irish government as well as the British politicians. And one of the Irish Justice Minister has been quoted as saying that something like 87% of asylum seekers or protected status seekers in the south of Ireland are coming in through the border with Northern Ireland. So what I'm trying to understand here is how this is going to, will this make any difference, and will the shared agreement, the common shared agreement from 2025, make any difference to improving that situation? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Just to clarify, you are talking about the potential data sharing of between Ireland and the United Kingdom if Ireland has a potentially ETA on its own. So this is a very interesting question, and I gave a good thought about it because we see that Ireland is progressively integrating EU asylum law. You may be aware that the vast majority of the new EU Pact of Migration has been integrated by Ireland, and the two legislative instruments that have not been integrated, which is the screening regulation and the return border procedure regulation, are nonetheless integrated without opting in. So even if Ireland is not officially opting in into the instruments, they're still going to implement in practice. So we see a lot of rapprochement between Ireland and the EU as regards asylum, but at the same time, Ireland is not going to be a member of the Schengen area anyway. So if it operates an ETA, and that database will have a series of data that will be of interest to the United Kingdom. The main limitation and the main constraint will be that Ireland will still be bound by EU data protection law. And in particular, the GDPR as regards data transfers to third countries. To the extent to which the United Kingdom is a third country to Ireland, which is not bound by the GDPR, but at the same time has an adequacy decision by the European Commission, or which basically says that the UK has an adequate data protection legislative framework, this will be the framework within which the data sharing should take place. So the limitation on EU law will be precisely that. The UK needs to remain a country that offers an adequate data protection framework. For now, this is the case, but this is subject to review every 4 years. So it is in the interest of the UK to remain a country with an adequate data protection regime, which means almost basically equivalent to the EU one, in order to be able to profit from potential exchanges of personal data with Ireland on that front.
Can I just check I've understood that correctly? Which is that the common understanding between the EU and the UK requires the UK to be a proper data protected regime, and at the moment we satisfy that, so we should be receiving the information, and that applies to the border between Southern and Northern Ireland, or should do.
Basically, the common understanding says that there is a commitment to exchange further data between the EU and the UK. This is very important because, as you know, the UK has lost access to both Eurodac and the Schengen information system, and therefore whatever additional information it can have on immigration, especially to tackle human smuggling, is very important for the UK. So for now, the common understanding from a few months ago is the basis under which the UK and the EU could work on an additional agreement on exchanges of personal data in this particular field. The UK needs to retain the adequacy decision at all costs. There are some concerns because there is an exception on immigration data in the UK data protection regime. So that is, for me, a thorny topic. The UK may need to provide adequate safeguards as to how they're going to use data on migration because of this particular exception in the data protection regime. But it is likely that this is going to be sped up because we see two developments which are very important. First of all, the EU is already entering negotiations with an agreement with the United States on identification, on exchanges data for identification and security screenings. So immigration information is to be in the future potentially shared with the United States. So that's a very important development. And in the past, the European Commission has also done a consultation on a potential introduction of legislation which will involve the reciprocal cross-border exchanges of data between the EU frontline guards with selected third countries. And I believe the UK, with the adequacy decision, is a prime contender to be a key player in that field. This has not been followed up. In the last 2 years, I've never seen any proposal, but we see there is movement with the United States. So the common understanding may provide, the impetus for future developments in this field.
Okay.
Very helpful, and an issue we should pursue,
yeah.
and we're very grateful to you for raising it.
Can I finish
sorry, please.
one small point
Please.
on the so the converse of what you're saying, just Professor, is that if the Irish Justice Minister had said they're concerned about 87% of inbound asylum seekers coming from the border on the north, that would be an incentive for them also to share and to look at this from that perspective. Am I right?
Yes, but Eurodac data cannot be shared by Ireland to the United Kingdom. There is no possibility of doing that with third countries unless with the new Eurodac rules it may be feasible, but I will have to look at that because it only involves returns. So yes, this is definitely, however, an incentive.
We follow that up.
We'll, if we can, we'll be in touch and just discuss that a bit further outside the meeting. Lord Tope.
Yes, so it was the last question, really. And that's the last question. Can you just, what lessons the UK and the EU can learn from my approach to the introduction of EES and ETA over the last few years? Mr. Calder, you want to go first?
Thank you. Yes, it's an absolutely revolutionary step which we have never, as third country nationals, ever experienced. And bear in mind that when the EES was first talked about, this was going to affect people from Venezuela, from America, from Australia. It was never going to involve the UK, which by far is going to be the main customers of the EES. And so, given that we have had quite a lot of years, it is slightly disheartening, but rather beyond the control of the UK government, that here we are, as Professor Vavoula has been saying, with so much divergence across the EU. And for example, if I go to, I've just discovered, delighted to learn that if I go to St Pancras, I'm not going to be asked to prove that I have somewhere to stay, whereas if I go to the Czech Republic, they want to know what sort of spa break I'm on. So it's, I guess, an exercise in demonstrating that the Schengen area member states are indeed sovereign and they will do what they like. But I hope, Your Lordship, if in a year from now we're all in a position where, yes, it's worked and now we're moving on to the next stage, and given Professor Vavoula's concerns, hoping that ETIAS will work. But let's get through this bit first.
Thank you. Simon.
Thank you. And so I think lessons learned from a Eurostar perspective is preparation would only enable an optimal solution for these big steps that travellers are going to be sort of faced with if there's close coordination, collaboration between the transporter and the border authorities. And it's something that we're very proud of at Eurostar, is working hand in hand with French Border Police, with the UK Border Force, Belgian Federal Police, but also the Dutch Maréchaussée as well, and making sure that there's that close collaboration between obviously our challenges of maintaining flow and giving a customer experience, and of course, all that within the context of secure borders, I think is absolutely key. But I think lessons learned, and I think we've touched upon it several times during this session, is how digitalization, how tech can help move some of these sort of processes that are having to happen in St Pancras, Paris, Brussels, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and Lille. And if you move those away and do those securely, and tech enables that, with the advent of the Frontex app, etc., I think we'll be in a much, much better position, in the next few years.
Thank you. Professor?
Oh, yes, of course. I think it is a little bit early to say what lessons are to be learned. We have to see how things go. I believe that all this phased approach has helped. There is a need for more coordination and more and clearer communication with the travelers who ultimately feel the impact of these new measures. And of course, I think that what we also must see further is, how oversight is going to monitor these new systems, and in order to monitor most of all the impact on individuals and how good they work, basically, and whether they are in the end worth the very huge investments.
But you would at least agree that the decision to have a phased introduction of EES was probably a very sensible lesson to learn, having initially tried a sort of big bang approach. Can I just say thank you to all of our witnesses? It's gone well over time as a result of the fascinating information that you've given us and your thoughts. So it's been enormously helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Professor Vavoula, we're going to be in touch with you pretty rapidly, and thank you for offering to give us some further information. And if either of the Simons have got anything further they think they would like to have said but you didn't, please get in touch with us, but do it as quickly as possible. But with that, we must bring the session to an end. Order, the public evidence session is